welcome to the March Lecture Series on this beautiful first day of spring. My name's Becca Cole, and I'm the president of the Friends of the Montana Historical Society. And as you know, the Friends is the volunteer group for the Historical Society, and this is our annual fundraiser. It's my honor today to introduce Almeda Bradshaw, a talented Western entertainer from right here in Montana. Almeda's love and appreciation for the cowboy way comes through in heartfelt expressions of the West. Almeda raised her family in north central Montana, along with showing performance horses, finishing hogs, running 150 mother cows, and operating a seed and feed business. She and her husband, former Marlboro man Merritt Bradshaw, now live on the Yellowstone River in Huntley, Montana, where he trains rope horses and she manages everything else. Almeda has written poetry, journals, and songs since her teen years and has been performing at cowboy gatherings throughout the West for over 2 decades with 4 albums of original songs and poetry to her credit. Please welcome Almeda Bradshaw.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate y'all having me here in Helena at the Montana Historical Society. It's an honor to be a part of Humanities Montana. And, whoa, you better behave there, young man. Okay. And yes, it's just really great to be here. So thank you. So, Homes and Honky-Tonks, post-World War II women in country music. That's what I do, is a series of shows about women in country music that focus on different historical eras. And we're going to go with World War II post. So let's begin. First of all, again, by thanking Humanities Montana and you folks. Let's begin with that picture-perfect family exemplified by Ozzie and Harriet and other shows from the 1950s golden age of television. Oh yes, Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, Make Way for Daddy with Danny Thomas, and then of course there were the married couple shows. I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, and I Married Joan. Remember that one? I never remembered that one, with Joan Davis. All right. Well, you take these picture-perfect families and put them into a modern new home in a beautiful new modern suburb with an immaculate lawn. And don't we have the perfect recipe for keeping up with the Jones? Yeah, and a little bit of pressure there, right? Okay, well, pressure is what this program is all about, because the post-World War II reality of America was a deeply troubled spirit. There was great social upheaval taking place. You know, country boys by the thousands left home and went to Europe to fight World War II. And typically they were our country boys because folks of wealth and education had ways of avoiding that. And then they were exposed in Europe to cosmopolitan life. Oh, of course, they were exposed to the grim reality of war and cosmopolitan life of Europe, of way beyond small-town America. Think of Cabaret, Liza Minnelli, right? Okay, then country girls had shucked their aprons for coveralls and they worked in the defense factories. They experienced social independence and economic freedom like they'd never had before. Woo-wee, doesn't she look determined? All right, so they were even in the service in the armed forces. So 19th century moral values began to fade in this new world, okay? The divorce rate soared after World War II. And we know because many young men and women going into World War II wanted to experience matrimony. So there were very, very many hasty marriages. And those hasty marriages didn't have the foundation to last. And that we will talk about more. So again, female sexuality, and the whole thing about sexuality was just like, you remember the Kinsey reports? Yeah, okay, all right. And half the women in Kinsey's 1953 report admitted to having premarital sex. Oh my goodness, I wonder what they'd say today. Oh, and then, so films, the noir films began to portray women as sexy, treacherous, and deadly. All right? This was the era of the goddesses, the sex goddesses, Marilyn Monroe, Jane Russell, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, voluptuous movie goddesses, and we know that it was Marilyn Monroe that graced the first issue of Playboy magazine in 1953. And early editorial themes of Playboy magazine was that men were slaves to money-hungry, manipulating women. Y'all remember Peyton Place? Potboiler of all kinds of hypocrisy and inequality and privilege, incest, abortion, adultery, lust, and murder. It covered it all. All right, whoa. Sounds like modern movies. In 1946, this magazine did a survey. A quarter of the women surveyed preferred, if they had the choice, to have been born male. It was a man's world. So, this battle of the sexes was stoked by VJ Day. As soon as the war was over, women were dismissed within a week of that from many of their jobs. But 75% of women surveyed wanted to keep their jobs. And 25% of the auto workers in 1944 were then reduced by 1946 to only 8%. So 9 of those 10 women who managed to keep their jobs also took a pay cut. So there was lots of strikes. Women were striking for equal pay and equal consideration. There was a new push to try to get the ERA passed in the Senate. It did pass in the Senate, by the way, in both 1950 and 1953, but failed in the House. Older women were being pushed out of the workforce, and younger women were being pulled out of the job market by the baby boom. In 1950, 1 in 3 women were married by age 19. And they said before the war that the ideal family was about 2 children. But after the war, the ideal family was 3 or more. Recognize anybody? No, I'm the product of a classic post-World War II family. All right. But post-World War Americans were troubled. These families, I lived in a troubled family, which we won't go into now, okay? But the post-war Americans were looking for the explanation for divorce and juvenile delinquency, truancy, runaway children, and illegitimate births. Sounds like today, right? Women were blamed. This is a very interesting fellow. Philip Wiley wrote Generation of Vipers. It is a scathing expose of everything he thought was wrong with America. Again, kind of sounds like today, right? But anyway, it's just he just regurgitated everything in his mind and in his life, and I think it was his therapy. Normally, we write those kinds of things and then throw them away, right? Yeah. But anyway, in it, he talked about something called momism. And in it, between World War I and World War II, women were being blamed for raising unmasculine and unprepared boys for service. There were 3 million men were deemed unfit for military service within that time frame, based on fitness, behavior, medical conditions, mental conditions, and addictions. So women were blamed for being number one, they were being overprotective. Oh, and then they were also being blamed for turning their boys into unmasculine men, okay? Okay, so, and then after the war, they were blamed for wanting to work and being disconnected from their families. So I tell you what, it was just a losing game all the way around, wasn't it? So, in 1947, this book came out, Modern Woman, The Lost Sex, and its premise was that women were disturbed and unhappy, and they were blaming it on the fact that they had tasted emancipation. Good grief. So, we, being the strong individuals that we are, we renewed our effort to be the very best mom and wife we could possibly be, and the best mom, and we all adhered to Dr. Spock. How many of you are Dr. Spock babies? I am. I survived. It was difficult, but I got through it. And then in 1947, that wonderful French designer Christian Dior came up with this silhouette of the most perfect woman in the world. She was beautiful. She was gracious. She was sexy. And this is when what doll came out, folks? Barbie, yes, I love it. Yes, and this is what was expected. The suburban woman was just supposed to look like this while she took care of the kids and did the dishes and the laundry and everything else. Isn't that ridiculous? So, suburban living on row upon row of tract housing isolated women and fueled their depression. And Daddy, he was commuting to work, keeping the home fires burning. This is where the suburban came into play. How many of you drive Suburbans today, or the equivalent of? Yeah, I do too. So, this is so interesting. What becomes the focal point of the home at this time? TV. And aren't we today complaining and concerned about this connection we have to this thing in our hand? That's where it starts. This was something you could look at and forget about things. You could look at this instead of the spouse across the table from you because there wasn't anything else to look at, right? Okay, so this was it. And TV ownership grew. Now, this is off the internet, and I know you can believe everything from the internet. 1 million to 15 million homes in 1 year between 1950 and 1951. So technology was such that they made it affordable, and everybody got a TV within a very short time. So psychoanalysis became quite popular, trying to figure out what is wrong, why am I feeling the way I am feeling? But you know, folks, we were living at a time of isolation, conformity, alienation, the pressure of the sole breadwinner that you find in the story of the death of a salesman, poor old Willie. Okay, and then this is the first time, folks, that we live under the fear of the atomic bomb. How many of you remember you're getting under the desk in school? How many of you remember you knew somebody that was building a bomb shelter in their backyard? Okay, this was a very new thing, and we were under a tremendous amount of pressure. And this pressure, stress, and discontent was most felt in the working class. A fellow by the name of Professor Eli Shenoy wrote a book about the condition of automobile workers. And he surveyed them, and they said that daily imprisonment was how they defined their work. No hope of advancement or escape. And more strikes occurred in 1946 after the war, with all these young countrymen coming back from the war and going to work and wanting to have better conditions. So there were more strikes in 1946 than had ever occurred since the union organizing days of 1916. Now, as the voice of the blue-collar worker, country music responded to America's turbulent psyche. Now, you must realize that pre-World War music was still being influenced by Victorian-era morals and values. And songs and music in the country era from the early part of the 1900s up to then was all about home and family and God, religion, and romance and sentimentality, and songs were lovely and just almost maudlin, right? And so those types of songs that the Carter family sang, Lulu Bell and Scotty, Patsy Montana, just were out of date. It was the era of electric music and the jukebox. The jukebox could be turned up. You could hear it over the brawling noise of those juke joints and honky-tonks down in the Texas oil fields where men were coming off the work and wanted to just let loose. All right, so this type of band, the traditional Western type of swing or type of band, was too large and not very adaptable to that bar scene. So the electric band with a punchy bass and electric guitar and the drums and the sustained whine of a pedal steel. Boy, you gotta have a pedal steel in country music. That replaced the other band. And there needed to be new songs to fit this unrespectable nature of the smoke-filled honky-tonk. So those Victorian sentiments gave way to smoke and drinking and wild, wild women. There was Ted Daffin's Born to Lose, Ernest Tubbs driving Nails in My Coffin, Lefty Frizzell, If You Got the Money, Honey, Hank Thompson's The Wild Side of Life. And from Texas, these were all from the Texas honky-tonks. Out in California, Merle Travis was singing Divorce Me, C.O.D. And T-Tex Tyler's honky-tonk gal was coming from California. Out in Alabama, there was Hank Williams. Louisiana's Webb Pierce and Farron Young were singing country songs. And more Texans like George Jones and Johnny Horton. Well, men dominated the country music scene at that time. Between 1945 and 1955, there were fewer than 10% of hit country records were featuring women. But there were just a few working really, really hard. There was Rose Maddox out of Bakersfield, California. Now, this is her with her brothers, the Maddox brothers and Rose. And a little side note, this was an acceptable way for women to be in the entertainment business, was with a family, within the context of a family. Well, in the 1950s and 60s, she took off on her own and began to do solo work, and she did some hits like Conscience, I'm Guilty. And this one, which I'd like to do for you, which is a perfect little song to start out, reflects the era perfectly. It's called Sing a Little Song of Heartache. Sing a little song of heartache, pillow full of tears. 420 memories will have to last through the lonely years. When your lover leaves you, your heart begins to break. Such a lot of heartache for someone like me to take. Oh, sing a little song of heartache, pillow full of tears. 420 memories will have to last through the lonely years. Well, I lived in a happy world, and he was there with me. Then she stole my happiness, and now my world is bare. Oh, sing a little song of heartache, pillow full of tears. 420 memories will have to last through the lonely years. Now he lives in her world, while I live in mine, counting all the teardrops just to pass away the time. Oh, sing a little song of heartache, pillow full of tears. 420 memories will have to last through the lonely years. Yeah, 420 memories will have to last through the lonely years. Thank you. That's Rose Maddox. Now, another little gal that was working really hard to be heard was Charlene Arthur from Texas. And she would leap from stage amplifiers and holler honky-tonk blues, and she'd sing lying down on the stage and convert wildly to entertaining tough Texas crowds in those honky-tonks. She was the beginning of rockabilly. So, she was also credited with inspiring the onstage moves of Elvis Presley. It's true. She says in an interview in 1985 with journalist Bob Allen, "Well, I was shaking that thing on stage long before Elvis even thought of it." So here's one of her songs. How many of you are YouTubers? What I love, absolutely love YouTube. You can go and find all of these people I'm talking about. You can see them not only live on some cases, but actually hear their recordings and find all about them. So you can find Charlene singing Burn That Candle on a nice old television show back in the day. It might have been the Ozark Jubilee. It could have been Town Hall Party. I don't know what it was. But here is a song that she sang. And it's kind of suggestive. Not by our standards by any means, but back in the day, this was a little bit too much for them. So here we go. Burn that candle, night and day. Burn that candle, oh, light my way. Yeah, keep that doorway open wide till we're strolling through that doorway side by side. Well, keep that candle burning bright, mother. I'll be kinda late tonight, mother. Oh, there's a yellow moon above, mother, shining on the white Burn that candle, oh, light my way. Keep that doorway open wide till we're strolling through that doorway side by side. Well, while that candle's burning bright, mother, oh, I'll be with my sugar pie, mother. Yeah, we'll be coming home tonight, mother, looking for that candle glow, oh, mother. Yeah, burn that candle, oh, night and day. Burn that candle, oh, light my way. Yeah, keep that doorway open wide till we're strolling through the doorway side by side. Yeah, well, after we have the wedding, mother, hey, we'll be heading to that candle, mother. So before we're wine and dining, mother, start that candlelight a-burning, mother. Yeah, burn that candle all night and day. Burn that candle, oh, light my way. Keep that doorway open wide till we're strolling through that doorway side by side. Well, thank you. Isn't that fun? Pretty tame by 21st century standards, but she was a brassy, sassy little thing, smoking hard, drinking hard, talking hard, living hard. She got herself in trouble for being hard to work with, so her record company dropped her, and she kind of went off into obscurity. So instead of a feisty, saucy little gal like this singing Burn That Candle, an unassuming Southern matron ascended to the throne as the honky-tonk era's queen of country music, and that was Kitty Wells. She was 33 years old, a wife and mother, when she stepped into the new world of smoke-filled taverns, thudding jukeboxes, and tear-in-your-beer misery to become a superstar. And she bent her traditional country style to fit the times. Now, publicly, she sang of guilt and remorse and illicit romance and sin, betrayal and broken dreams. But privately, she was a picture-perfect, shy, soft-spoken, dutiful wife and mother. Quite frankly, folks, she was an original superwoman. She did it all, and did it all well. I mean, she, honestly, you know, she sang of honky-tonk angels, but definitely was not one. So she wore that pre-war gingham. You can see her little outfit, straight out of the country catalog. And she sang a doleful catalog of cheating songs that spoke directly to women, victimized by the honky-tonk lifestyle. Well, folks, it really all starts with this fella here, Hank Thompson. In 1952, he recorded The Wild Side of Life, and it went on to become a huge hit. 15 weeks at the #1 spot, and in it he laments how his wayward bride-to-be has left him for the honky-tonk life. You wouldn't read my letter if I wrote you. You asked me not to call you on the phone, but there's something I'm wanting to tell you. So I wrote it in the words of this song. I didn't know God made honky-tonk angels. I should have known you would never make a wife. Yeah, you gave up only one who ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life. Now the glamour of the gay night has lured you to the places where the wine and liquor's flow. And there you wait to be anybody's baby and forget the only love you'll ever know. I didn't know God made honky-tonk angels. I should have known you would never make a wife. Yeah, you gave up only one who ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life. Yeah, you went back to the wild side of life. There you go. All right, well, guess he just wrote her off as some kind of floozy. Well, we'll see. Kitty had been doing shows and some recording while having babies and supporting her husband, Johnny Wright, who was also a country artist and recording star. But her career really wasn't going anywhere. And she was really considering retiring completely and then just going back, take care of the family, take care of her husband, and take care of the home, which nothing wrong with that. But Decca Records says, we got one more song. You got to come in, you got to record this. And she really didn't want to, and she argued with him. But she finally gave in because she knew she'd get paid $150 for doing it, which was the union scale for recording at that time. And in the 1950s, that was no small chunk of change. So she went in and recorded, totally unaware of the history she was about to make. As I sit here tonight, the jukebox playing, oh, a tune about the wild side of life. And as I listen to the words you are saying, it brings memories when I was a trusting wife. It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels, as you wrote in the words of your song. Too many times married men think they're still single. That has caused many a good girl to go wrong. Well, it's a shame that all the blame is on us women. It's not true that only you men feel the same. And from the start, most every heart that's ever broken was because there always was a man to blame. Come on, ladies. It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels, as you wrote in the words of your song. From the start, most every heart ever broken was because there was the man to blame. It's not God who made honky-tonk angels. Well, yes, sirree. What I like about this song, it's a shame that all the blame is on us women is a whole discussion starter right there. But it's not true that only you men feel the same. And I'm going to go back and talk about the pressures. Post-World War II, men were expected to come home after the bomb, after Nazi concentration camps, after warfare in a foreign country like they've never experienced before, and just pick up right where they left off and be the bread earner. And women were expected to go back into the home and be the perfect wife, and the pressures on both men and women were equally tough. And one of the things, though, that we are finally coming to terms with today is what we call PTSD. After World War I, it was called shell shock. And if you couldn't handle it, if you were a victim or succumbing to shell shock, then you simply weren't man enough, baby. Okay? And then after after Vietnam War, we know how we treated our veterans. It's horrible. And now we're finally coming to grips. Well, World War II, we still weren't recognizing what was going on. And we expected these men who had been going through so much, and it was just a formula for disaster, okay? And that's why our divorce rates went up, why we just had, people were turning to drugs, it was just a mess. Men were, alcohol, we end up wanting to escape somehow the pressures. So it wasn't true that only the men felt that way, but we have to admit those guys were having a tough time. So this was recorded May 3rd, 1952, and it was a sales sensation right off the get-go. By summer, it was a full-blown phenomena. By the end of the year, it was sitting #1 at the Billboard chart, and it's the first one for a woman to hit #1 at the Billboard charts. So the song's premise that hypocritical, deceitful men are responsible for fallen women was certainly controversial in the conservative 1950s. NBC Radio Network banned the song, wouldn't even play it. The Grand Ole Opry would not allow her to sing it on the radio. And there's that, we go. So then this is what Minnie Pearl had to say. There's Minnie, and little Jimmy Dickens, and Kitty, and a little cowgirl, unknown cowgirl off to the other side, which is, I love this picture because it represents so much of the symbolically of what was going on in Nashville, which I don't want to take time to get into now, but there's another whole topic starter. But this is what she says. Fans went wild over Kitty. When she did honky-tonk angels, they'd scream and holler and carry on. Well, after World War II, things began to change. Women began getting fed up with their way of life. They began to push against it, and when they heard songs that reinforced their feelings, or songs of love told from a woman's point of view, well, they identified with it, and they went out and bought the records. Now, that's no small thing, because the country songs were mainly for and from a man's perspective, as I showed you before. Now, this song, Kitty says, was kind of the women folk getting back at the men. And she introduced a slew of country standards in the wake of honky-tonk angels, and I'll just do a couple for you really quick. This one, of course, I always associated with Emmylou Harris, who has been one of my big idols all of my life. So, making believe that you still love me, it's leaving me alone and so blue. Yeah, I'll always dream I'll never own you, making believe it's all I can do. I can't hold you close when you're not with me. You're somebody's love, and you'll never be mine. You're making believe I'll spend my lifetime loving you and making believe loving you. Believe. Making believe. Another one she did is kind of fun to do. And please release me, let me go. I don't love you anymore. To live together would be a sin. So release me, oh, and let me love again. Yet I have found a new love, dear. lips are warm while yours are cold. Release me, oh darling, let me go. So please release me, let me go. I don't love you anymore. To live together is a sin. So release me, oh, let me love again. There you go. Oh, can you imagine standing there and saying that to your spouse? Oh, man. That'd be a tough night, wouldn't it? Oh, that was really kind of fun. Y'all remember the British singer that made such a huge hit out of this? All right, who is it? You ought to know. Engelbert Humperdinck. Remember? It sat for 6 weeks at the top spot on the British charts. In fact, it prevented the Beatles, Penny Lane, and flip side of that 78 was Strawberry Fields Forever, prevented that one from hitting the top of the charts. So old Engelbert, he had his moment in history, didn't he? There you go. You know, that song has been covered by 45 major artists, all the way from Bobby Darin to the rock band Def Leppard. I'm serious. That's a great song, folks. Well, old Kitty, she was the #1 top female stylist every year from 1952 to 65, 13 years. Had her own syndicated TV show. Anybody remember it? Okay, all you great country fans. Series of cookbooks. She was in the Hall of Fame, you know, opened her own museum, on and on and on. She was the big time real deal. And anyway, in spite of her success, the country music industry was developing a set of business prejudices that would keep women, female performers down for decades to come. And folks, you want to know something? It still exists. I got to tell you, I was doing some programming over in Hamilton. And I don't listen to the radio a lot because I got so much stuff going on in my own head. But one day I decided, this trip about Deer Lodge, I decided to turn on Eagle Country. I listened to Eagle Country all the way from Deer Lodge to Hamilton, and I heard one female voice. One. And it was in Christmas time, and it was a Christmas song, and she was a front singer for an all-male band. Not one artist, not a Carrie Underwood, not a Reba McEntire, nothing. And I called and talked to him. I did, by golly. I'm not going to say much happened from it, but I let him know how I thought. So anyway, you know, the industry in Nashville at this time was really hidebound in conservative religion, and the Opry was very resistant to female performers. Roy Acuff had advised Johnny Wright, Kitty's husband, to not bill Kitty as their show's headliner because he says, it won't ever work because people just don't go for women. Give me a break. Music Row axioms were, women don't sell records, fans won't buy tickets to their shows, and they're not worth investing in. Because, and it's a reality, folks, some things happen. You might get pregnant, you might get married, things change, and sometimes it's really hard. Not everybody has the ability or the support system to do what Kitty did, was to have a full family, husband, house, everything, plus be a superstar. Not everybody has that ability. So there's times when you are going to step away from one thing and go into another, and that's perfectly okay. That's one of the things I love about being a woman today, is we have choices. We can do whatever we want. I've been a stay-at-home mom. I have a degree. I've opened a business. I do fun things like this, and we can all do that. I think that's fabulous. So, but Kitty's success did start a talent search. And, these were the guys that said, Roy Acuff and Chet Atkins were the ones that were kind of saying, that Chet said, it's not prejudice, it's all about money. And it's true. Business is, the bottom line is money. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that either, because I've been in business. I'm in business right now. I sell products over there. It's okay. So, they were searching, and they found this little gal, Goldie Hill, had a little bit of success. She was actually the first woman on the cover of Country Song Roundup, But no single female artist ever duplicated Kitty Wells' success during the hard-hitting honky-tonk era. Now, there were tons of these kinds of things, sister acts, duos, groups, because this was another acceptable way for women to be in show business, either in a family unit or surrounded by safety in numbers, and a bunch of women in a group. So there were lots of them. There were like the Oklahoma Sweethearts, the Morgan Sisters, the Marlin Sisters, Ann Jones and her Western Sweethearts, Abby Neal's Ranch Girls Band. But the most significant was the Melody Ranch Girls, launching the career of this woman, Jean Shepherd. She was born in 1933, the son of an Oklahoma sharecropper. And at the age of 10, she moved to California with the family in 1943. And every weekend, at the age of 15, she was running up and down the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, working in a band, in her Melody Ranch Girls Band. And at one occasion, Hank Thompson was, I don't know if they shared the stage with him or what, but he heard her and says, "Hey, do you have a recording contract?" She said, "No." He goes, "Well, I'll see about that." So he went and he argued with Capitol Records and convinced them they needed to hire this woman, that she was good, and they did. So in 1953, she had her first #1 hit with Furlin Husky. Y'all remember Furlin Husky? It's a Korean War tearjerker called Dear John. Dear John, oh, how I hate to write. Dear John, oh, I must let you know tonight that my love for you has died away like grass upon the lawn. And tonight I'll wed another. Dear John. Here's Furlin's part. It's spoken. Well, I was overseas in battle. Yeah, when the postman, he came to me. And he handed me a letter. Oh, I was happy. I was happy as I could be. For the fighting, it was over. And the battle, we'd won. Well, then I opened up that letter, and it started, Dear John. Dear John, oh, how I hate to write. Dear John, oh, I must tell you tonight that my love for you has died away like grass upon the lawn. And tonight I'll wed another. Dear John. Furlan keeps on going. Well, will you please send back my picture? Because my husband, he won't sit now. And when you hear who I'm wedding, honey, well, I just don't think you'll even care anyhow. Well, the ceremony, it has started, and I will wed your brother Don. Will you wish us happiness forever? Dear John. Sadly, that was very true. I just did this program in Glendive, and a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, you know something, I can remember hearing my bunkmates open a letter and say, oh, I just got the Dear John letter, or the DJ letter, they'd call it. This was true. This happened a lot, hearkening back to these young women who were left alone at home, fresh marriage, fresh baby, and they were lonely, and they sought solace. And so that's where the whole Dear John thing came from. Yeah, isn't that something? All right, well, this little gal was on a trajectory. She was the first woman to do a first-time thing, and it was record a concept album. A concept album is an album of all the songs that have a theme running through them. And this one, fittingly, was Songs of a Love Affair. And I found this one little song that's on it, and I'll do a portion of it for you. I think it's just cuter than a button. It's called Sad Singin' and Slow Riding. Now, where's that gonna, what? Sounds like a funeral procession to me. There'll be some sad singing and some slow riding next time you come staggering in There'll be some coffee drinking and some flowers bringing, but you don't tell me where you've been. Well, you pat my cheek, kiss me quick, and you go stepping out. At 2 and you come dragging in your shirt tails hanging out. There'll be some sad singing and some slow riding. Next time you come staggering in. Yeah, sad singing, slow riding. The next time you come staggering in. There'll be some coffee drinking and some flowers bringing, but you don't get to drink any or smell any then. Next time that paycheck you cash and you go stepping out, well, and you buy drinks for the crowd, well, you better save back just enough to buy yourself a shroud. There'll be some sad singing and some slow riding. Next time you come staggering in. She's had just about enough. Isn't that fun? Well, I'll tell you what, you know, as I grew up and got into music and stuff, and I often wondered why there was just so many songs about drinking and divorce and cheating and all this awful stuff that basically seemed to me at the time to define country music. And I didn't like it. I mean, I sing some of them, you know, but for the most part, they're just too negative for me, and I don't sing a lot of them. But after I've done this program and I began to do my studies about women and country music and everything, I began to realize there's a reason. Songs don't exist out of context. There's always a reason for them to have been written. So just all the stuff that was going on after World War II lent itself to all of that kind of song. So here's one, though, that Gene Shepard recorded that I can sing. I like the message in this one. It's called A Satisfied Mind. How many times, oh, have you heard someone say, if I had his money, oh, I'd do things my way. Oh, but little they know, oh, it's all so hard to find one rich man in 10 with a satisfied mind. Yeah, once I was living in fortune and fame. Grab your partner, let's waltz. I had all I needed to get a start in life's game. Then suddenly it happened, oh, I lost every dime. But I'm richer by far with a satisfied mind. 'Cause money can buy you back youth when you're old, or a friend when you're lonely, or love that's grown cold. Yeah, the wealthiest person is a pauper at times compared to the man with a satisfied mind. Yeah, and when my life is over and my time is run out, yeah, my friends and my loved ones, oh, they'll weep, no doubt. But there's one thing for certain, when it comes my time, yeah, I'll leave this old world with a satisfied mind. There you go. Isn't that a good one? We could all hope for that. So, she was the 4th woman to join the Grand Ole Opry. Now, membership in the Opry is different than actually just performing. Lots of people perform. But to be a member, you have to live within 100 miles of Nashville. You have to be available on a moment's notice because this is a radio show that went on, I think, probably daily or something. And it was constantly needing to fill people into it. So if you got a call and says, hey, we got a slot open, you need to be there. So you had to be close to become a member. She was the fourth woman. And what I find interesting, the other women, remember that there's this resistance in the established conservative Opry at that time against women. So analyze the 4 women that are there. Minnie Pearl, who was a country rube. She was that classic comic figure that made fun of that ignorant hayseed, okay? And that was acceptable. Then you had Del Wood. She was a piano player who was our pianist most often in church and at home, gathering the family around to sing. It was Mom. So that was acceptable. You couldn't deny Kitty Wells because she was a superstar. So for Jean Shepherd to come in under that was pretty amazing. So she was really making her way as well. So she met Hawkshaw Hawkins. Oh, what a hunk. And they got married in 1960 on stage in front of about 4,000 fans. So they actually preempted Johnny and June doing their little, engagement thing that they did on stage. So they were married for just 3 years, and she had given birth to a son, was pregnant with her second son when we know in March of 1963 that we lost Patsy Cline, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Cowboy Copas, and actually Cowboy Copas's son-in-law, Randy Hughes, was piloting the plane. And so Cowboy Copas's daughter lost both her husband and father. So we lost Hawkshaw Hawkins, and widowed at a young age, pregnant with her second son, very traumatic. And she recorded, though, in 1964 and put out a masterpiece called Second Fiddle. And her fans, it just flew off the shelves. Her fans bought it in great numbers in support, showing them how much they loved her and supported her. Now, the interesting thing on this 78, the B-side, is a little tune called Two Little Boys, written by Marty Robbins himself for Jean in honor of her situation. And I'd like to do that for you, so grab a hanky. This one's a heartbreaker. When I awake every morning, find that you're not there with me. Tears start to fall without warning. Then through a curtain of sorrow I see 2 little boys bring me so much joy. I love them, heaven knows I do. They say that one looks a little like me and the other exactly like you. Well, someday they'll ask me about you, and I'll tell all the ways Daddy loved. When they ask where you are, oh, I'll tell them that you're watching from heaven above. Yeah, it's lonesome without you. I'm missing you most all the time. Sometimes I'd quit if it wasn't for 2 little boys, yours and mine. 2 little boys bring me so much joy. I love them, heaven knows I do. They say that one looks a little like me, but they both look exactly like you. That's sweet. Yeah. Well, Jean's triumphant yodels, her to-the-point women's lyrics, honky-tonk honesty, and pure country attitude brought her more than 45 hits in a career spanning 50 years. But she worked in the shadow of Kitty Wells and later those of Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, and Tammy Wynette whose hit making always seemed to outshine hers. You know, there's a giant pyramid and only a very, very few ever make it to the top and become household names. And underneath them are all kinds of men and women who love country music or any type of music, like myself. I'll never be a household name. I'll never be famous, and that's quite all right. But I'm doing what I love. And so she never made it up there to the tip top, and she never resented any of their other people's successes. She held her own. She did some things like going to bat for the music industry, causes that she believed in. She agitated for better union scale for her band members. And then after, Olivia Newton-John won top honors in country. She was a pop star, you know, sort of like that Taylor Swift phenomena. Yeah, and Taylor Swift was pop all the way, but she got her start in country. And so anyway, in 1974, Jean protested a back to country music protest. And the embarrassed DJs stopped playing her music. Record label dropped her because she's an outspoken woman. And in 1982, she and her husband, Benny Birchfield, they rededicated their lives to Christ. She stopped playing bars, and she was one of the few celebrities to take up the cause of forgotten and ignored Vietnam veterans. So this tough little lady braved the macho honky-tonk climate of the early 50s, okay? And even more remarkably, she did it on her own. See, Kitty Wells had her husband with her the entire career. That's Johnny Wright and her at the young age, and there they were still performing and of course, she had her solo stuff, but she had her husband partnered with her. You see, the era of husband-wife duos, but Jean, see, she did it all by herself. It was the era of husband-wife duos. You had Joe and Rosalie Maphis, Urban K, Bob Atcher and Bonnie Blue, and up in the upper left-hand corner, the lovely Marilyn Tuttle and her husband, Wes. Now, I just have to say this. Little Marilyn Tuttle is still alive, and she's in her 90s. And this is me and her back in 2014, down in Las Vegas at the Autry Museum doing a show. And so there she is, and she is still, ladies and gentlemen, still singing whenever we go to the Western Music Association convention and other places. So she's an amazing treasure, alive, totally there. I mean, just fabulous. So let's keep going. 50 years in the Grand Ole Opry. They honored her in 2005, and when she passed away in 2016, she was at the age of 82. She had been the longest living consecutive member for 60 years in the Grand Ole Opry. So there you are, folks. Those were the two ladies that kicked it off, that began to really shake up stuff in country music. But we need to now talk about the most influential, successful, and acclaimed vocalist of the 20th century. Who? Patsy Cline. Yeah, Patsy Cline. She was born Virginia Patterson Hensley in 1932 in the mountains of Virginia. And there she is on your left, on your right, excuse me. And she absolutely loved country music. She was obsessed with the radio. That's when there was just nothing but radio, no TV, right? And she'd just tune into that thing and sing and listen. And here she is in a high school, second row, third from the right with the scarf. Yeah. And her father deserted the family at age 15, and she quit school and started working as a clerk in drugstores and singing in clubs at night at the age of 15, 16. In 1948, she wrote the Grand Ole Opry for an audition, and they asked for a tape and a photo. Folks, we think of that, that's nothing now. We have cell phones that we can take a selfie, we can record, we can send something instantly. For her, back in that day, in the late 40s, at being a poor country kid, that was completely beyond her capacity. Couldn't do it. And so then a time came when this fellow, Wally Fowler, brought his Oak Ridge Quartet to town and did a show, and she was brass enough to go back there and talk her way backstage and get a spot to audition. She sang for him, and then he let her get up on stage and sing. And she says, Wally, will you please use your influence and get me an audition up in the Opry up in Nashville. Well, nothing ever came of it, so but she was sure trying. And just a little side note, this Oak Ridge Quartet is now known today as what? Yeah, the Oak Ridge Boys. You know, they just changed personnel over time, but this entity has always been there. So yeah, the Oak Ridge Boys was originally Wally Fowler's Oak Ridge Quartet. So, well, in 1952, 4 years later, she began to work with Bill Peer in the Melody Boys and Girls. A little combination of young men and women doing Western music on radio and live. This is when Bill Peer gave her the stage name of Patsy. Now, this is interesting. I found this photo, which shows the back says Bill Peer's Melody Boys. And look at the way she's dressed. That is something. She was having an affair with him, by the way. And what I am surmising, and I don't know, this is not fact, I'm just speculating, that she was such a star, and he was putting her in the front. He dropped all the extraneous other boys and girls and just focused on her with the Melody Boys backing her up and had her dressing like that. I mean, is that scandalous or what? That picture blows me away. But that's what I believe was the context of perhaps that was going on. So then, shortly after that, 1953, she married small-town playboy Gerald Klein. And maybe that was, I don't know what was going on with that, but that's what she did. And later that year, Peer took her to Nashville, and she appeared on Ernest Tubbs' show. And the Midnight Jamboree was called. And then she got to sign with Bill McCall and 4-Star Records. Now, she, in later times, would refer to Bill as the Snake. Can you look at that? Get that thing off me. Oh, doesn't he look like a snake? Yeah, what a creep. Oh, get that off me. So, for 5 years, she struggled with McCall Records because they just gave her mediocre stuff to sing, and she just wasn't really getting anywhere, struggling to try to find who she was and her voice and all that, you know. I mean, she had the voice, just trying to figure out where she was going with it. But out of all those songs, she did come up with her standard show opener, a cute song called Come On In. Come on in, sit right down, make yourself at home. Well, if I had one wish, I wish I could go back to my old neighborhood where the good folks, they'll love you as their own. Then I'd go over to my neighbor's house, come on, knock on the door, and they'd all sing out, come on in, sit right down and make yourself at home. I'd sing their praises long and loud, 'cause they're all my folks, and I'm mighty proud of the little old town back home where I was born. And I wish that I could hear them say in that good old-fashioned friendly way, come on in, sit right down and make yourself at home. Well, they don't lock their doors at night, 'cause they all know they're a-doing right, and the good Lord's bound to have them for his own. And I'd go back to hear them pray in that little pine church, and they'd all say, come on in, sit right down and make yourself at home. Yeah, when I was a child of 3, I'd said my prayers at Mama's knee, and I knew right then from God I'd never roam. And when I get my summons on that judgment day, I hope that I can hear them say, come on in, sit right down, make yourself at home. Now, of course, that song is very indicative of the old-style country that was still being, influenced by the Victorian era values. And of course, none of that ever really disappeared. You have to, it's not like those songs just totally dropped off the face of the earth. But what was really dominating country at that time was the honky-tonk music. Well, in 1955, she talked herself onto stage with Jimmy Dean in a Washington, D.C. nightclub and landed a job on his TV show of Town and Country. Then shortly after that, in 1957, she triumphed on Arthur Godfrey's talent search show, singing Walkin' After Midnight. which then led to a national hit. I go out walking after midnight, out in the moonlight, just like we used to do. I'm always walking after midnight, searching for you. I walk for miles, go along the highway. Well, that's just my way of saying I love you. Yeah, I'm always walking after midnight, searching for you. Well, I stopped to see a weeping willow crying on his pillow. I wonder if he's crying for me. And as the sky turns gloomy, night winds whisper to me, I'm lonesome as I can be. Oh, oh, I go out walking after midnight, out in the moonlight, just hoping you may be somewhere I'm walking after midnight, searching for me. Yeah, searching for me. Yeah, walking after midnight. Isn't that fun? Now, that same year, in 1957, she divorced poor old Gerald and ended up marrying good time Charlie Dick. And it is their relationship that has made up the movie Sweet Dreams. How many of you have seen Sweet Dreams? Okay, that's a good one. You should check it out. Yeah, that movie came out in 1985. And, well, she was on her way, folks. She was named Most Promising in 1957 at the Billboard Magazine Award, the 5th Annual Country Convention in Nashville. Then in 1958, she had her daughter Julie while Charlie was finishing his Army hitch. In 1959, they moved to Music City, where she could then become a member of the Grand Ole Opry, which she joined in 1960. And she endeared herself to the other female Opry members. She was a sweetheart. They said she was fabulous. And like a lot of country women, she was kind of hard drinking and smoking and just kind of a tough gal, but she had a very, very loving heart. She stayed busy with the Opry and the Town Hall Party and Ozark Jubilee TV shows. She got out of that 4-star contract and signed with Decca. And then in 1961, she had her son Randy and released a first recording of the new sound that was coming out of Nashville. See, rock and roll had hit country music really hard in the 1950s. TV replaced live radio shows, so the whole presence of that country music, the old-style country music, was fading out. And there were 4 architects of this new Nashville sound because, see, they wanted to compete. Rock and roll was pulling all the young people. And it was alienating some people that didn't like the loud and raucous sound. And then, so country people didn't know where to go, and they were losing country, and they wanted to attract pop. So this is what they did. Chet Atkins of RCA, Don Law of Columbia, Owen Bradley of Decca, and this little gal, Anita Kerr, born Anita Grilly in 1927, were the architects of the new Nashville sound. She was playing organ and arranging for choirs in her church by age 10. She was a prodigy. By age 23, she moved to Nashville and developed the Anita Kerr Singers. She was responsible for arranging the strings for the new Nashville sound. Think of Sweet Dreams. How does it start with those strings that go, sweet dream, right? Okay. So anyway, the very first song that came out with that sound, Patsy didn't want to record it. She argued and argued. Same thing Kitty did. You know, quit arguing, girls. Just go ahead and record the songs because you never know what's going to happen, right? So she didn't want to do it, but she ended up doing it. And here it goes. I fall to pieces each time I see you again, and I fall to pieces just your friend. Yeah, you want me to act like we've never kissed. You want me to forget, pretend we never met. Well, I've tried, but I haven't yet. Yeah, you walk by and I fall to pieces. Oh, you walk by and I fall to pieces. There we go. Well, by mid-61, this was a #1 country hit and a crossover pop smash hit. So they accomplished what they set out to do. They captured a whole new segment of America to listen to country music because it had a more sophisticated sound, and they were on their way. Well, that very same year, she had that car wreck. I don't know if you remember anything about that, but it busted up her face pretty good. She had to get plastic surgery, and she was pretty beat up. And then that August, she recorded Crazy, Willie Nelson's song that he wrote, by the way. And she liked to introduce it when she was on stage. She'd go, you know, I recorded a song called I Fall to Pieces. And the house in a car wreck. And now I'm really worried because I have a brand new record and it's called Crazy. So that's how she would introduce it. So, well, she finished 1961 as a #1 female vocalist. She triumphed at Carnegie Hall. She starred on American Bandstand and the Tennessee Ernie Ford Show. And Ralph Emery, the MC of the Grand Ole Opry, said, she's just steamrolling the business like no one had ever seen. Well, in 1962, she had her 4th major hit, She's Got You. You know, she'd long since abandoned the cowgirl fringe for elegant gowns and began to embrace that Nashville sound with more conviction. And she was electrifying on stage. I don't know if I have the right picture. No, I didn't. Okay. You know, she entertained. This was the beginning of entertainment of the person on stage. How many of you watched a bluegrass band play? And they do nothing but stand there, dead as a doornail in their face, and they just play. And they stand and they move back and they get, you know. But see, that was actually tradition way back in the folk music of the deep Appalachian Mountains. They believed that the song was to do the storytelling. The song itself was to evoke the emotion, not the vessel. You were just the singer. You were just supposed to present it and let the people hear it and react. And so there was no emotion added to it, no movement. And so that's typically how country western music was still being delivered. So she began, though, to move on stage. Might be just a shoulder, might be a hand. She might step like this. And of course, with the voice, she's beautiful, the whole package. And now, of course, we have people like Jennifer Lopez, Carrie Underwood. I mean, it's full on, you know, entertainment, the whole thing, lights, smoke, mirrors, everything. So anyway, she was really, really mesmerized her audiences and named most programmed artists by the DJs at the 1962 Country Convention. A month later, she was headlining in Las Vegas and recorded for the last time Faded Love, Sweet Dreams, and He Called Me Baby, all heart-stopping performances that would be issued posthumously. She attended a show in Kansas City. It was a benefit show, and flew down there with Hawkshaw and Cowboy Copas and Randy Hughes. And Dottie West was co-artist on the show. And when it was time to come home, Dottie argued and tried so hard to get Patsy to ride home with her in the car because they were concerned about the conditions. Actually, all flights had been grounded. And they chose to take off. And they crashed March of 1963 in very, very heavy, foggy, rainy weather. Randy lost his bearings, and they lost all 4 of them. So that following week, instead of canceling that Opry production, they did a tribute to Patsy. And Minnie Pearl got the weeping crowd to laugh, but she left the stage herself in tears. And, I'm sorry, I should have moved that for you. Well, just shortly after that, only a few weeks later, Jan Howard was approached, and Jan was the wife, a very, very good country star, of Harlan Howard, and that's Harlan Howard. He wrote I Fall to Pieces. He was a songwriter. They approached her and asked her to do an album of Patsy songs. Oh, my goodness, she adamantly refused. Absolutely not. I will not capitalize on the death of my friend. And it was not until 1976, 13 years later, that Loretta Lynn produced an album called I Remember Patsy. Not one of Patsy's songs had been recorded in 13 years. It was taboo. Nobody would touch them. Isn't that amazing? And I Remember Patsy. And of course, that broke that taboo, and after that, all of her songs were being recorded by many different artists. And in 1973, she was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. There you are. So I will close with Crazy. Yes. And I'm not Patsy. Y'all know that. I'm crazy, crazy for feeling so lonely. I'm crazy, crazy for feeling so blue. Oh, I knew you'd love me as long as you wanted. And then someday you would leave me for somebody new. Worry, oh, I do, I let myself worry, wondering what in the world did I do. I'm crazy for feeling that my love could hold you. Oh, I'm crazy for trying, crazy for crying, and I'm crazy for loving, oh, you. Patsy Cline. Homes and honky-tonks. Post-World War II women in country music. Go to Humanities Montana, and you can see my other programming I do. And if you'd like to have me come back, or for any organization, I'd love to come back and do a show for you. And so, yeah, thank you very much. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. It's just my pleasure, absolutely. And so there you go. And I think my sound man up there